How's everybody doing? Welcome to another edition of The Life Equation. And though life's mysteries may be complex and seemingly impossible to solve, may that never stop us from trying. The name's Zach, as always. Thank you again for being here. Been a couple weeks since we've had an episode of the podcast. It's been a little, I just had a lot going on between life stuff, but I guess it's fitting giving the title of the show and given everything we've been going through. But I mean, apart from that, I'm just happy to be back. And I'm very happy to have a very close friend of mine as today's guest, somebody who I shared an internship with. We roomed together, talked a lot in the past about like games, shows, friends, life stuff. And so I thought there weren't many more fitting guests to bring onto the show. So if everybody would please welcome to the Life Equation, Mr. Declan Shiner. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well today, Zach. Thank you for asking, and it is a pleasure to be here on the Life Equation with you.
Ah, very happy to have you here, man. Yeah, so you're another one who's like pretty new to this too, right? You're saying podcasting, haven't done a whole lot of that, talking, doing X and O.
Not in this format, no. I definitely mimicked podcast production. I took a class in college for audio production way back in the day, but and by way back, it's been like maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. But yeah, otherwise, this is kind of a new style of just discussion, I suppose, at least in a more recorded and professional format.
As as professionally as I can possibly muster. I was telling one of my friends who was on last week, like with like cussing and everything, if it slips through, no worries about that. I try to hold a professional mantra. I try not to just drop cusses every other word, but yeah,
Of
no, I mean,
course.
I think there's a first time for a lot of professionalism, and I think it's just somewhat good to get into. It's a good little cycle to get into, and it helps people to really absorb more information. Although maybe that sentence didn't, because you can probably count the amount of times I said two in that span on two hands. So
Mhm.
gonna have to do a little better than that. But anyways, getting back to the subject at hand and not my nonsensical rambling, which is hopefully not the focus of today, because we have a much more important topic to get to today than that. And that is mainly just friendship. And more specifically, how do you think you discern like real friends from acquaintances, people you've just met in the past? So what are your thoughts on that?
So, I've always considered that there are different levels of friendship, and it comes with different levels of trust and how much you are willing to spend with that person. If you see yourself really wanting to spend every day just talking with them, or at least every few days, and someone who you always consider for whatever is going on in your life, that's the kind of close friendship, that close bond that is always very important to you.
Yeah.
When I think of friendship, I don't think of it as very much like a competition or a ranking system. I think you can have tons of people that you are fairly close with, but also there are people in your life that aren't going to be as close. And do you value them any less as people? Of course not. But there are times when it's like you are friends with someone, but you also can be like, okay, I I do have people who I am closer with and that I have just more trust in and uh, a closer bond and relationship with. That doesn't mean that they are less in any way as people. It just means that there's just they are your friend and you do treasure and value them, but maybe not as much and not as closely as someone else.
Yeah. Now, do you have
If that
any, is
makes
there
sense.
anything that stands out to you in particular when you say treasure and value friends? Is there any particular quality you look for in someone you call like a really close friend?
I I think it ultimately comes down to how much you are willing to share about yourself, your deeper thoughts, your deeper senses of what you value most. If you are able to open up your heart like that for somebody, that shows a level of respect and trust in them, that you know that they are willing to listen to you and understand you and to get a grasp of what makes you you, not just a surface level interest in one's hobbies or interests that may be shared between the two. It's something where I would do anything for you because I admire you. I want to be like you and I want to be there for you.
Yeah.
those kinds of qualities are what I would want out of a close friend.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you make about, hey, I would do anything for you, or looking beyond just, hey, we have a common interest in something. Because when we first met, for instance, just to give a practical example, obviously we were working in a summer camp for kids, teaching them like game design concepts and coding. And we had a few similar interests, but that's not why we became friends. We became friends because I felt like you were a counselor at that camp that I could really open up to and talk to. And we talked a lot about past experiences. And yeah, like you're a guy that I would love to help with a lot of projects that we're working on together, or I could tell you a lot about myself that I wouldn't tell a lot of other people who I'm just acquainted with, or some buddies who I just meet, I don't know, going out and watching sports. Like when I first got to Charleston, you were one of the first people I called, and I was saying, "Hey dude, I think I'm kind of struggling mentally. I don't really know how to feel about this whole big change of scenery thing. How do you feel about this? Or like is there anything that I can take from a friend that might help me out of this funk?" And so to me as well, I think that you kind of hit the mark on that spot, is just finding those people, not just the kind of people where, okay, like I know this person, I'm very familiar with them, I've been over to this person's house, but could I sit down with this person and could I talk to them about, hey, like here's what's been going on with my parents, or hey, like can I talk to you about something personal that I think you could be doing better? And I think that's something else worth considering, is not just how nice you can be to each other, but also how like firm in a way you can be with each other. Like one thing that I actually have been doing since I got down to Charleston is I've joined a lot of young men's groups, not because, let me start again on that point, just because I feel like it's important to always have that sort of group where you can just be straight with one another and you can give each other advice and you can go out and you can tell each other, hey, here's how we're going to go and be great people. And that's something that I had when I was home in New Jersey before I moved. But then you lose that as you like go out and you go out on your own, you kind of restart in a different place. But I think that's a sign of really good friendship, is that once you leave that kind of area and you feel that void, like wow, these people that I can talk to, like I can call them. I'm so thankful, like for that's one of the best things that people underestimate in our generation is, forget phone booths or forget nickels and like, putting coins in a phone booth. You can just call somebody anytime you want to. Like if your grandma's across the world, hey, guess what, we have FaceTime for that. Even then though, it's not the same. I feel like it's important to have that kind of base and to really have that sort of mutual connection and like be able to talk to people more in depth.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And one thing that absolutely comes to mind with that is I have a lot of close friendships with people I have met online who live across the country from me. I have my buddy Logan who lives in Minnesota. And for the long time, we were friends because we played Destiny together. And sure, would have conversations that got a little deeper at times, but we didn't really have a very close, tight knit connection. Not until we went to a convention in Wisconsin and met each other face to face for the first time. After that, our friendship really got closer and deeper and more interpersonal than it would have been otherwise. It really is a testament that face-to-face connection really is one of the most important things about one's life. And just like we are social people, humans are very social creatures. And while it is wonderful that we have all of this technology, all of these ways to communicate across long distances, nothing can fully replace the type of connection you form with people face to face.
I mean, absolutely not. And it's like you said, we met in person. I'm very glad to hear that you took a lot of people from that Discord server and you actually went out and you got to go meet them. I think that's what a lot of people sort of get wrong about Discord, is that people think if you're using an online chat like that to communicate with people about a hobby you might have in common, sorry, that it might be a complete substitute for like real life communication. And I think unfortunately, there are still a bunch of people that use it that way. But that to me was never the intention. The intention was, hey, like I don't know who likes this game that I play or who watches this show that I might watch from across the world. Like through online communication, I've met people not just from the States and like Minnesota and California. I've also met people from England, from Norway, from Finland, just to name a few. And I would genuinely love to go meet those people sometime. I'm actually considering briefly going out in February, taking like a straight up abroad trip to Sweden just to go like to a gaming convention that I'd like to be a part of and
Mhm.
meet some people just because I think they've been awesome human beings. I'm like, dude, I would love to totally meet you and interact with those kinds of people in reality. So yeah, I think it's a testament to that though. Like, hey, if you think you can talk more with this person, you actually want to go past like this virtual communication. Like this is really just the first step, Discord and all, and then you actually want to go and meet somebody and really understand the person and not just the voice.
For sure. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Mhm. And do you have Jeez, I feel like that's what I was saying about Discord as well. Like that's what a lot of people get wrong about it. Do you think how would you describe to an older generation who maybe doesn't use the kind of stuff we do? How would you kind of convey that like, hey, this has changed my life or this is really a good thing?
That's a tricky question because as I truly believe there is a lot of good that comes from Discord and like having social platforms like that to keep kind of meet people you wouldn't have otherwise and find people who, if you live in a small community, maybe there aren't enough people there that really share your interests in a way. I remember when I was young, uh, I was like the only kid in my school that had a PlayStation 3.
Mhm.
No other kid had a PS3. Everybody else had like an Xbox 360 or something, or just didn't really play video games, the same ones that I did. And so it was only by kind of joining a clan through Destiny 1 that I was able to start having these like online friends that I could do certain activities with. And that significantly changed my life and my outview about, or my outlook rather, on on just internet interactions and online friendships. However, there can be a bit of a dark side to these things, as there is with any kind of social group. There are sometimes you don't really have the best judgment, especially as a kid, of what kinds of groups and communities are positive and welcoming and healthy, and which ones are toxic and bad influences and can lead to a lot of issues.
Yeah, would you
So
say
that's
that
something
I
you
think that's like sorry, I think that's one of the big things though that like parents get caught up on, like you were getting at with kids, is that they see all these discords and their first instinct isn't, "Oh, hey, he can have friends." Their first instinct is, "Watch out, these people might be manipulative." That's exactly what you're getting at, right?
right. And I don't want to discredit that or discount that because it is absolutely a real and present danger. We hear about it all the
Yeah.
time
Look at all
on
like
social
the
media.
scams when Undertale was getting huge.
Oh yeah, there's so much of that, and even now with like other communities, like say the Five Nights at Freddy's is a big one. A lot of those indie horror games actually kind of have that same situation going on. But however, at the same time, there can be a lot of good that can come from it. There's always going to be a sort of scale to these things, or a spectrum rather. And it is up to the parents, I feel, to do their due diligence and make sure that the interactions that they're having in the communities that their kids are being present in are not bad, for a lack of a better term, or just like ones that aren't going to damage their kids' mental well-being.
Do you think there's ever a point where parents at that point become overbearing? Like, do you think that if, like, let's say, let's take like 13-year-old Declan, and instead of like a Destiny clan being with a like close knit group of people, let's say it is with people way further across the world. Like, you still want to go meet those people in person. Do you think like your parents would have had any sort of obstruction to you just like trying to meet people like that?
Absolutely. Of course, going on your own to meet people that you've never actually met before is always a very dangerous thing.
Mhm.
I mean, we see all sorts of instances of catfishing. However, at the same time, it should be something where the parent goes with them to make sure that it's safe. That kind of situation there, that's a little better. Instead of outright dismissing it as ever being a possibility, instead be like, okay, we can give this a try, but I'm going to hold your hold your hand in more of a figurative meaning, or at least be there to make sure that nothing goes wrong and that this is overall a safe situation.
Yeah. Do you think the culture of that is different between parts of the world? Like, do you think parents in like Europe would be more like loose to that kind of thing than say like American parents?
Not entirely sure, honestly. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, and I don't know enough about those cultures to make a definitive statement on that. But I do feel that it ultimately comes down to one's parenting style and the upbringing. If you grow
Mhm.
up in a much more tight knit community where online interactions have never really been seen as a thing, then there's going to be a lot more apprehension about that, as it's a much more foreign concept. But if it's something where a lot of people interact with social media and people are more familiar with that concept of those online interactions, they may be a little more hands off. Or if they are just already hands off parents, for better or worse, and they feel like, oh yeah, they're just interacting with their online friends and they're very kind of lackadaisy about it, and then yeah, that's a possibility too. And you will find that the more that these parents have these hands off interactions and just don't really care what their kids are doing, the more they start to become exposed to things that are very much inappropriate for them.
Yeah.
At least from what I've observed over the course of my time here.
Yeah. Do you think like well, like definitely online, that's the thing, right? Like you don't want your kids getting exposed to a lot of things they might not be ready for in quotation marks. But I feel like in a way that sort of has two sides to it because if you're too overprotective, then you could be limiting your kid from listening to something that really changes their life or something really inspirational. Like the reason why I brought up the European example for one is because I've actually known a lot. I don't know them personally, but I've heard stories through like our online communities and through like my speedrunning communities, in fact. I've heard stories of these guys like being 19 years old and just like taking flights or going on long drives over the country to see people who they hadn't met yet. And I think in Europe, that's why I ask, it's different because like you probably change between countries. You can justify that because it's more communal and people have to go through whole different cultures and languages and systems of commerce and all of that throughout time and actually look at a lot of different places and see a lot of different things. And I'm getting a little bit off topic here. I think I want to go back to that point with the in-betweens in Europe later. But as far as kids actually getting exposed, I think like obviously you don't want 7-year-old kids playing something like Honey Pop or something ridiculous like that to like
Oh,
that would be
absolutely not.
freaking ridiculous and I wouldn't want my kids playing that. But at the same time, I do think like if you have a kid who's like neurologically advancing, who's like 13 years old and he wants to play something that has a little bit of a darker tone to the story, like I don't know, like if um I don't even know what a good example of that is in a video game, but like just to say for example, you don't think a kid is ready to read like a Stephen King novel, but the kid wants to read a Stephen King novel because there are some really interesting takes on like horror and they want to be a movie producer. Or if somebody's like 16 years old and they wanted to read like the Communist Manifesto, not because they actually want to follow Karl Marx, but because it's educational. I feel like there's a point where you still have to be hands off on that. And to bring this all back into the friendship perspective, I think if you are too much like tugging on the leash in a sense, you can prevent people from really like you're preventing kids from kind of discovering themselves and you're preventing kids from really going out and meeting somebody who might have changed their life. I sound very I don't know how I sound if I'm a little too like hippie or free spirited in that sense. Because obviously, like you're saying, there has to be a limit to it. Like the reason why parents exist is because at the end of the day, they should just want their kids to be safe and to make good choices. And so long as kids have a sense of making good choices, I feel like they can be a little more loose. It depends on the kid to and fro, I
Definitely.
suppose.
And to that end, I think that i- for your examples of wanting to like watch a Stephen King movie or read a novel from Stephen King or read the Communist Manifesto, I think it's definitely important to let them make those decisions and to see what comes of it as well. If the kid is very much freaked out by a horror film like Stephen King and they start having nightmares, it's one of those where you also need to be like, okay, what we'll do is we'll have a special night for this where even if you aren't old enough, technically, if you don't meet the age rating of this, we'll still do it as kind of just a little one off. I know my dad did that with me for Terminator 2 when my mom went on a trip at one point, even though I was like a little kid. He's still like, yeah, let's watch this movie because it's one of my favorites. And it was a great way for us to bond, even though it's definitely like an R rated film. And I was only like 13, 14 at the time. And that was, I think, a really good thing because it allows us to test those limits to see where we're comfortable and as well as to kind of have those moments of, oh, maybe my parents aren't as overbearing. They aren't so restrictive. They'll let me kind of test the boundaries a bit. And I think that's also a very important thing too, is just let your kid have some moments where they can test those boundaries to see how comfortable they are. If they do run into a situation where they aren't comfortable, then they need to feel safe to come back to you and not feel like, oh, they're gonna berate me and go, I like say I told you so. No, they need to have that moment, that trust with a parent to be like, I know they're gonna be there for me if I run into any trouble.
You were saying like at some point like it's a level of trust. Like you think it's a reflection of trust if you can say, "Hey, like I appreciate that you're mature enough at this point to kind of see this," or "Hey, we can talk about this more." Like maybe just reiterate a tiny bit.
Yes, that level of trust, that level of respect. I've encountered examples in my life of parents who have been far too overprotective, overbearing, and when the kid finally breaks from that restriction and they just go wild, and then those parents lose that connection with their kid. That's something that it's almost an ironic twist in a way where because they set all of these boundaries, because they didn't trust their kid to make the right decisions on their own, they then lose that kid entirely. They lose that ability to have that trust, and the kid doesn't trust them back if they end up straying. They're like, oh, I don't want to go back. They're going to double down and instead just do their own thing.
It's
And
paradoxical because you think instead of like making kids able to make their own choices, you're actually doing the complete opposite. And then like it completely breaks the trust.
exactly. And so you have to have that level of, okay, I'm not like I still want my kid to be safe and make the right decisions, but you also have to let them struggle, to let them falter, because you have to have that kind of bond in the way that they know that they can rely on you to pick them up when they make a mistake, when they fall.
Mhm. See, I honestly, I want to echo that home because I strongly stand by that point. One thing I will always die by, the hill I will always die on, is that if there's any definition or like sort of embodiment of freedom I can give to somebody, it's that freedom to me is giving people the room to make their own mistakes. Because there's a lot of things in life that you can try and tell a kid, hey, this is bad, or hey, like here's how you want to manage this. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only real way you can get better at something is by horrifically messing it up. Like I've across like airports you go to, or across like weird roads you might have to drive on with a certain intersection. Maybe you don't get it completely right the first time, hopefully not in a disastrous way, or you miss a flight or you crash into somebody. But sometimes you only really understand how something works by doing it. I think there's a quote from Oppenheimer where he says something along the lines of theory will only take you so far, where he's like this super genius and he's explaining, okay, like this should not work with the bomb. And then somebody comes in and he's like, yeah, well, it just works. Like theory will only take you so far. And in a way, I think that's a perfect example of life. I think like having to kind of stray away from the more lethal examples, just even something as simple as interacting with somebody, or even me doing this, going out on a podcast, sometimes I might say something really stupid, or I might forget to check my mic stand before it falls off in an intermission. And so you have to make sure you double check that before the start of the podcast. Good one, Zach. Before that, though, like sometimes the only way to really learn from it is to kind of mess it up from doing it yourself. And does it suck when it messes up? Like, yeah, of course, nobody wants to have that thing go wrong. And you want to feel like as an adult, you're in control of things, you have it under control. Maybe you ended up missing a student loan payment one time, or maybe you said the wrong thing and you got like a warning at work or something like that. But that is something that you will remember, as opposed to somebody saying something to you 15 times over and over again and you kind of putting it to the back of your brain because it sounds repetitious, or you just googling how to make a cover letter one time and then after you write the cover letter it's gone because you don't remember anything about it, you don't like get any feedback on like, hey, this is a really bad thing to do in a cover letter. It's just like there. But I feel like if you have the chance and you are able to walk through that experience and do it yourself, that's something that is a lot more meaningful.
Absolutely. It We have to get burnt. We have to understand that fire is bad, not because people tell you that it is, but because you've experienced it firsthand. And it is hard to have that moment of like, all right, we need to just let them do their thing. We need to just have them get burnt because we want to protect them. We want to have that moment of we want to make sure we don't have them make mistakes. We want them to be safe, to be happy, but at the same time, if they're always happy, they can't appreciate it. They have to have those moments where they go a little further than they should.
Yeah.
And it's not in the ideal of like, yes, we have to hurt them, we have to have them get burnt and mess them up. No, it's we don't want to traumatize them, no, but we want them to understand that eventually there are going to be moments where we there are dangerous things in the world. There's going to be moments where we can't always be there for you, but we'll always be there for you when you call on us.
Hmm. Yeah, no, right on. I think that's sort of a great thing to have parents for, is they're there when you need you, but you give kids the ability to be functional and to live on their own. I kind of want to tie this back into the theme of the episode with friendship. Do you think that what are some things you've encountered that you've kind of had to learn by trial by fire with friends? Like, have you met some people you thought were really good friends and then you like discovered a lot of bad things about them? Like, do you have any experiences like that?
In terms of them being bad people, not as many
Okay,
there,
well,
but
bad people's a very loose term. I guess like are there
right.
characteristics about them that you like realize might not make them great friends, but like only after the fact?
I think a lot of it comes down to how much you are the one who's pushing for the friendship versus how much they are. If they are reaching out to you and being like, "Hey, do you want to be part of this? Doing this thing. Do you want to be there while I do it?" or something like that, as long as it's something that's good, of course. But
Mhm.
when it feels like you're the only one making an effort in the friendship, that's typically a bad sign. Even if they aren't a bad person, just the fact that they aren't really appreciating you in the same way that you appreciate them, that's the sign of of a one-sided friendship that isn't going to be healthy if you keep trying to push it. That's something that is very important to recognize and realize. And for me, I've fallen for tons of those situations where I really wanted a friendship to work out because it would come at a time when I didn't really have a lot of closer friends, and then it just wasn't what it wasn't reality at the end of the day, and I walked away from that feeling far more hurt than I probably would have if I had understood that they're they're just being friendly to me, not my friend.
When you say it wasn't reality, you mean like it seemed like a one-way street, like you appreciated them more than they appreciated you?
Absolutely.
Mm. Yeah, no,
And
that's something that I feel like a lot of people, that's the worst too, especially in like a relationship when like you can't expect anything to be reciprocal and then it just doesn't fire back. It's like the
mhm.
worst.
Oh yeah. That's always so hard to deal with because you want it to work out. You really want to be with that person. You care about them. You really enjoy being with them, but when they don't appreciate you, when they don't feel the same way about you, that can really sting. That can really be just a very painful letdown at the end of the day.
Mhm. I feel like do you feel like it changes a lot when you get older? Like, do you think that gets what am I even trying to ask here? I feel like that changes a lot when you get older too. Like as you when you're a kid, there are certain things you look for in a friend that you're kind of just starting to do what you described, the whole trial by fire aspect. But then even then you have some people who get to college and whatnot, and it still feels like they're able to not really discern between people who are trying to take advantage of them or people who aren't as friendly with them versus people who, hey, I actually do really want to help you. Do you think that, like, see, I feel like there's something buried here that I'm trying to ask, but what do you think prevents people from really being able to discern between quality friends and people who are using them for a greater gain?
I think some of it, especially at times like going to college or early on in your development as a kid in school, a lot of it comes from I want to make friends. And it's that overwhelming desire of I want to have friends, I want to be around people, and you kind of look for very just material qualities at first. Do they share the same hobbies and get like do they like the same games that you do? Hey, we're both in the same class. Do you want to like help me study with this? And then you start to kind of get friendly with them, and then you're like, okay, I have a friend here. I want to keep pushing that, and you kind of push aside a lot of red flags because hey, I finally have someone. I have this friendship here that at least on the surface seems like it could be great. And then as time goes on, you aren't as valued in their life. You're just kind of a person who started talking to them out of all of a sudden. You didn't really come together, more like you approached them and they just kind of acknowledge you're there, I guess is a great way of putting it. And like I had friendships like that in college where it was more of a happenstance and a commonality. And I did have friendships there that I did feel were very I thought were very strong friendships. And then as soon as one of the like I graduated or they graduated, even when I tried to kind of keep in contact with them, they never put forth the effort. And so that really stung for me because it's like I thought we were closer. I thought we were friends. And to learn that they just didn't value that friendship at all, seemingly, that really stung.
I think some people, to be fair, I think and I'm not defending your friend because I imagine you lived the experience, but I get what you mean. For some people, I think it's easier for like them to do it in person as opposed to them doing it over a couple of texts or really expressing themselves. I think COVID didn't help with that at all. When we started going to college, was immediately being slapped in the face with, "Hey, you should remain distant from people," or "You shouldn't really sit down and talk with people for a long time." Because I think that when you have somebody like that who when it breaks down, it's unfortunate when you see somebody have to move on, but I like there's a bunch of reasons why it could happen, like your friend might change or maybe like the interests weren't just enough to help carry your friendship. And I think that's something that you really touched on very well earlier in the show was that I can't really base my friendships based solely on my hobbies because then when that medium is gone and you just have to talk to somebody, if there is nothing there, then quite literally there is in fact nothing there. Like if you can't make anything out of it with that one like sort of intermediary middleman gone, I feel like there's just like no reason, there's no substance and nothing else can pick back up from it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see where you're coming from with that for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do form a lot of friendships early on based purely on our hobbies because that's one of the most common things you can really relate to somebody with. It's like, hey, you like this thing? Well, I also like this thing. And that's not necessarily bad, and it can lead to a lot of great friendships down the line, but just that mutual interest does not a friend make. Uh,
Mhm.
that's why I remember my parents always tried to push me towards being like, hey, yeah, you can relate to these people with your games and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you need to have more diverse friendships, even if it's for something you aren't really interested in. But being able to connect with those people, you'll see they they still have things that mean a lot to them, and if you show interest in their interests and put forth that effort, then they will reciprocate because they're seeing that, hey, he's getting interested in something he didn't really care for originally because of me. That means he must value me as a friend in that case. And then they'll do the same for you. It's like maybe I'll check out what he's interested in as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of connection and friendship that really can start out strong.
Yeah. So you're saying like if the friendship, if the chemistry truly is there, then maybe some people will be willing to try new hobbies or look past their hobbies just because, oh hey, like my friend is doing that. Maybe I should do it.
Right. And it's one of those where, as well, it, I guess the reasoning I was trying to get at is like they showed interest in my hobbies, even if they didn't really like them originally, then maybe I should give their stuff a try too. Just because they valued me, I should return in kind.
I mean, that's kind of how we started watching our our Friday show together. Was I would never have gone out and sought that kind of medium out by myself, but because it gave me an excuse to keep in touch with an old friend with Declan, I feel like that was justification in my mind. I'm like, you know what? We'll have fun laughing with this. I'm with good company. I'll give it a shot. Let's do it. So I think that kind of hits home right with what you're talking about.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. I What do you think the difference? Well, what do you think really prevents people from? Because I love the point you made about hobbies, and I love the point you made about the hobbies not being enough. Why don't you think hobbies are enough? Like, what aspects do you think go beyond just like the common interests that really help people connect?
I think it's because that friendship isn't so much about the person, it's more about the common ground, the hobby itself. You come together because it's just like, oh, yeah, we both like this thing and we're going to enjoy said thing together. And you're not, you're looking more at the thing rather than at the person.
Mm,
That's not to discredit like long lasting friendships that have definitely formed through playing games together. I mean, like I said, I met one of my close friends, Logan, through Destiny, through playing that game together. But it also one of those friendships that you need to spend more time together and then learn more about them and have those like closer talks to have it so not only are you inviting them to do things, but they also are inviting you to other things. And a lot of that comes from let's take it outside of just doing this same hobby. Let's try out something else. If you can try out a new thing together, or you can try out something that they like or something that you like, that can help bolster that friendship because at that point, it's not just about the hobby, it's about spending
person.
time with that person.
Yeah. I think you make a really interesting point about like focusing on the person instead of the hobby, or better yet, like if there is a hobby between you two, it has to somehow involve both people. I think in my mind, that's why things like sports are such a popular hobby nowadays. It's why they've sort of taken over a lot of the world, is because that like they do both. It's not only, hey, I really like watching this, but sports to me gave me a reason to talk with other people and sort of bond with some other people. I've been like interrupting my speech a lot today, so sorry about that. But it gives you an excuse to interact with other people while also taking up a common interest. Like one thing I've kind of discovered since I've moved down here is that I really don't like watching football by myself as much as I thought I did. Like I like the game and I definitely am able to still name a lot of players and I'm still able to go back to a lot of experiences I've had with football. I can remember a lot of games very closely, but that's because I don't remember the game just to remember the game. I remember it because of the experience I was having. Like Christmas Eve of I think it was 2020, when was this? 2023? Oh, it was Kenny Pickett's last year. Or second to last year. That would make this 23. Yeah, 23. So it was like Christmas of 23, and they were playing the Raiders, and they won like 13-9 because they scored a last minute touchdown. Now, remembering that is one thing. I don't remember the game because of the game. The game itself was honestly terrible. It was a 13-9 game, or like a 13-10 game. There wasn't a whole lot of offense. The reason I remember that game is because I watched that game with my family at my uncle's house the same night where we all joked because last year he made this like grain alcohol gumbo that like would have absolutely toasted anybody who drank it. And so we spent the whole night like joking about how he made that last Christmas and how it wasn't at the party that year. But like that, you know what I mean? Like football gave me an excuse to talk to other people, and I loved talking to other people. Now, granted, I'm getting away from like the friend aspect of it because that's with family. That's not exactly like, oh, hey, like I don't know these people, and football is a way I'm connecting with other people. But then you just like look out in American culture to a lot of other lives. The reason why people go to pubs, even if we pull back the TVs, like before all the bars in the world were packed with sports TVs and different glowing screens, people just went to the pubs because like they wanted to talk with friends. And another thing that gave them an excuse to talk with friends, to just kind of decompress about like, oh, hey, my job, how's this been, or your kids or your wife or some other thing, or some philosophical talk they wanted to have, is because they both just like sitting there and just like having a couple brews, testing out something they didn't know. That in of a sense is a hobby. Like drinking to an extent socially can be a hobby in the same way that like going to the movies can be a hobby. But back to your point, if you're going to the movies with friends, you're not talking with your friends during the entire movie. You're just watching the movie. So
Mhm.
I definitely think that's a big suspect. And do you think that's like the biggest contributor as well? Like if we're gonna make a comparison to what you've been talking about, like you separate Destiny and like playing Destiny and talking with people over a voice chat very much from something like reading books or like watching a movie, like I said. So how like do you think that's like the biggest separating factor? And do you think like you've had any exceptions to that? Like are there more, I suppose, individualistic hobbies that have still given you the opportunity to talk with friends a lot?
Hmm. It's a good question,
That's a
actually.
loaded question. I'm sorry if that seems a little
No,
like.
no, it's good because I think about how I've connected with people over different books or media that I've consumed about different little hobbies like that. But I feel like some of my strongest friendships have come from playing games together,
Mhm,
whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or online games like Destiny or Guild Wars, something like that, because it's a lot more interactive and much like sports, at least with the aspects of these MMOs that I play, there's a sense of cooperation and teamwork in there that you don't really get from just like all reading a book together. That's not to discredit like book clubs or anything. I think those are a very fun way of bringing people together. But for me personally, I have found that working with people and collaborating in a game tends to build these stronger bonds. And I think of sports, actually, getting back to that, with when a parent enrolls their kid into a sports team, it's not purely because, oh, I want my kid to play this game. It's also to teach them the value of teamwork and friendship. Because when you bond as a team, when you meet these other kids and you work together, you build those bonds. You build this sense of trust that, all right, my teammate can do this. I can pass them the ball. I can rely on them to cover for me as we make this play. Something like that
mhm.
is a very important aspect of sports for kids, and it teaches them those values, and it helps them kind of have this sense of friendship and camaraderie and community very early on.
Yeah. See, I think that was one of my biggest mistakes growing up, and especially in high school, was I didn't do nearly enough to kind of get out and have that sense of camaraderie. I think sports, for better, like I was about to say for better or worse, but that doesn't make any sense. Sports absolutely do what you're saying about, hey, it gives you an excuse to get out and build relationships with kids and understand, hey, we're all working towards this common goal. Let's do this together. I didn't join nearly enough clubs that were like that. I joined like um just like some basic club that was intention. I'm really struggling to talk all of a sudden. It's been a theme today. That's what happens when I take 2 weeks off the show. But I've I was a part of one club that was primarily about setting events up, and I was also a part of like student council. But that's not the same kind of thing as setting up for, a big game or talking about, hey, how are we going to work together to set this play up? The only sport I did in high school was track and cross country by extension. And listen, like I loved the team that I was with. I loved talking with those guys when we were running and just building that team relationship. But like to put it lightly, I don't care what people say, running is one of the most individualistic sports you can possibly do. I think there is a certain bond you can build with a lot of people by training communally, like training with people and working towards like, hey, we each want to get these times and talking with people while you're running is great. But that being said, when the show begins to start, it's not like you're still communicating with those guys about a play you need to run or about a pass you need to make. It's like, okay, I'll see you at the finish line. Thanks for all the training. And then you go and you're doing it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sleeping on track and cross country because those were like the best years of my life in high school when I had goals to set, when it taught me a lot about like just being dedicated to something, about taking care of my body and about like just understanding other people and understanding myself. It still has a lot of that team aspect within it. I just think there are a lot of other mediums you can use to sort of get that justification. And I want to circle back to what you were saying about book clubs or about even not even sports, but just some other social gatherings or communal events you can have in a high school or even as you get into the adult world. Book clubs in of themselves, obviously you're not going to all read a book together most times anyways, but in a way like a book club in of itself is a good social thing because it encourages you to do something productive individually. And then after you've done something productive individually, it allows you to come back and be more communal and have more confidence when it comes to talking to other people. Like you read a chapter and then you go back to the book club and then you can confidently talk about, hey, here's what I felt about this. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. And then maybe that opens the door to one of those communications or like one of those deeper conversations you were talking about was, oh, hey, like I think it's really interesting you thought about it that way. I never really thought about the way that Huckleberry Finn did this. Like, do you have any sort of relationship to this part of the book, like in your own life or something like that? There's probably a lot more to it before you get deep like that from one book club conversation, but hopefully, hopefully that's drawing on what you were getting at.
Yes, absolutely. Um, I think about uh, our Bible study actually that we're doing on
Mhm.
Sunday nights now, and that's been like sure we're all kind of going off and doing our own thing for the rest of the week, but then when we come together and we all talk and communicate about the material we each individually study, that's also a great way to not only just have a conversation, a healthy kind of communication, but it also allows us to kind of get to know each other a little more, to see how we each interpret these things and get a better idea for one another's mindsets and perspectives. So there is a lot of good that can come from things like book clubs, Bible studies, and those more kind of, I guess, individualistic hobbies when they come together.
Yeah. Do you think it's important to have a lot of friends who are like that, who are different from you as far as their viewpoints or their backgrounds?
Yes, I do believe so. It, granted, you don't want to go too far out to be completely incompatible, but it is good to be able to see something from another person's perspective, to see that they might have a little bit of a different view than you and still respect them for that. Otherwise, we just become this very toxic echo chamber.
Hmm. And at Reddit, pretty
Yeah,
much.
Reddit, I guess, yeah, would be a good example of that. But even just like in smaller communities where you had things like the for example in Christian history like the satanic panic about things like D and my sorry about that about D&D or Harry Potter as a good example. There were a lot of Christians who completely wrote those two things as like an example completely wrote them off because they dove into magic, witchcraft, and fighting demons, and you they didn't want anything with demons because that's against the Bible. And it's like, not really. And also, there's a very important distinction to separate fiction from reality. And then we had this whole thing with the Satanic Panic of it getting back to an earlier point in this podcast, how parents were too tight on the leash, and these kids
Mhm.
immediately kind of rebelled from that by playing these games, by playing Dungeons and Dragons, by playing Magic the Gathering and hiding that, and dividing them from their parents because they knew if they got caught, their parents would punish them.
Yeah. Well, that's the big argument with like evangelical Christianity circles, like Christian circles in modern day, is that a lot of the biggest examples you hear about is that it's way too restrictive, and then when somebody tries to stray outside of that even a little bit and like do something that maybe isn't like directly by the book, they get reprimanded. And in a way, I feel like it completely goes against just like it actually prevents people from living closer to a book or closer to living like a good life is when you tell them, hey, like you can't actually do this or you can't think about this. You have to just always stay like this. Then all you're going to be doing is like encouraging them to go against you, as you've been saying, to stray away from their parents, break bonds. And then all you're ending up with is just a messed up scenario and a really weird, like standing with your parents. I'm
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to start making a bingo square because I feel like in every life equation episode I've said like, all right, we're not an explicitly Christian podcast, and yet somehow or some way I think I've mentioned the Bible in like every single episode of this we've done so far. So
Huh.
I have to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, and to be fair, it's definitely relevant. Like the whole Harry Potter thing. Like if you say, oh, you can't read Harry Potter because it's witchcraft, I'm like, no, it's freaking not. First of all, like some people say yoga is satanic, and like maybe somebody who broke away from Christianity to go like do yoga met some of like their best lifelong friends from yoga, like to the point we're getting at. So I think
Mhm.
it's important like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now, do you going back to the point we were on? Do you have anyone like? Do you have anybody who you would consider a really close friend and is like very very ideologically different from you, like somebody you met on Discord?
I would say so. There are a few, definitely, that I feel like if I were to discuss certain topics with them, that we would definitely get into intense debates on. I know, like, I think about one of my closer friends that I still have from high school. I'm a Christian. He's atheist. And that's something where even though we are very different in that ideology, that he doesn't believe that God exists and he believes that that's all false and fake, even though I do believe in it, we're still friends because we still value each other's friendships and we still have mutual trust and respect for one another. We can look past those differences and see that we still enjoy each other as people.
Mhm. I also imagine that like you guys aren't always talking about faith if you're like in like other circles and like you're talking about like your family and things like that. Like it doesn't always
Exactly.
come up. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one thing too is like it kind of touches on the point that we made earlier about how deep you can go in a conversation with somebody. I don't necessarily think you have to go to a theological level for somebody to be considered a friend. In fact, what am I saying? That would be ridiculous if that were the case because I wouldn't be here with a lot of people. So not theological, I guess, is like where we draw the line in a sense. But I do think there are a lot of if you can talk about a lot of more personal things, is the way that you put it earlier. I think like that's the measure of a lot of good friendship. I think like there's a line where you can agree to disagree on certain things. And if that's theology, like if you guys can still bond a lot over some great things and some experiences you've had in your life, to me, I think that's very important. I think that's why there's a part of me that's been dancing around that circle in particular. It's just like I can look past some people's ideological differences because I've talked to people who are very ideologically different than me. There's a lot of people on Twitch watching this podcast right now who like I love talking to them to death, and they do come from very different walks of life than I do. Now, does that mean that like we can never be friends? No, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. And there's a lot that I can still learn to gain from talking to people, and there's a lot of great experiences that I can have with people who might be very different from myself. So I think that's also valuable to realize, especially for those people that you mentioned. Like maybe they are inside of an echo chamber, whether it's Reddit or a Christian circle or an atheist family who says like spirituality and religion is all nonsense. And like anybody like who is that, like you shouldn't talk to that person. They're kind of insane. In the same way, it prevents people from really going out and discovering themselves. So I think overall, that's kind of what I said before. The point I would live and die by is don't be afraid to just go out and think for yourself. And not everything you're going to find is good if you do that. There's inevitably going to be some things you come to the conclusion of that are like, oh, wow, like this really isn't something that I want to do consistently, or these are the kind of people that I really don't want to be around, but you're doing it and you are understanding these are the kinds of friends I want to make. This is the place I want to be. And you understand in your head and your heart, like, why that's the case. To me, that's valuable. That's extremely valuable.
Absolutely. You're going to find people who mesh with you, who you do value as friends and close comrades. And you're also going to find those moments where you realize these may not be the people for you. And ultimately that is your journey. That is your decision to end up making, and you'll find the right people. You'll find the right place to be. But you may have to give it a try a few times. You may succeed, you may fail. At the end of the day, you'll find the right people so long as you're looking for them.
Mhm. What is your now, Declan? In today's day and age, we definitely live in a time where people say there's this big loneliness epidemic in spite of all the technology we have and in spite of the connections we have. So, if there are a lot of people listening in right now who might not have a lot of friends or who feel like they haven't been able to get out and make mutual connections with a lot of people, whether it's because of like their confidence or their situation, or maybe like they have family members that are restrictive, what's your 2 cents to those people? Like, what can you tell them about living their life and about like finding people that are compatible with them?
I I think at the end of the day, sometimes we have to look inward and see what is holding us back. Sometimes it's a sense of I don't want to stray from something I'm comfortable with. Sometimes getting out of your own element, getting the confidence to try something else, something new, and maybe then you'll meet somebody that you wouldn't have otherwise. It's like it's one of those things of, well, what I'm currently doing definitely isn't working. Maybe it's time to have a perspective shift. Maybe it's time to give something else a try that I hadn't really considered before. I think about, for an example, myself during my job hunt when I was unemployed. I didn't really go out very much. It wasn't until my parents actually suggested I try going to a Bible study at our church. And at that point, I started or not reconnecting, but I started connecting with people I otherwise wouldn't have that share very similar views and perspectives as myself. And at that point, I didn't feel as lonely as I once did. I knew there were people out there that shared a lot of my interests, and also ones that had very different perspectives on things that I could learn from. And I wouldn't have ever had that if I had just stayed holed up in my room all day.
Hmm.
So I think it's one of those where, at the end of the day, might have to just build up that confidence and give it a try. Easier said than done. I realize that.
Hmm.
But sometimes just stepping out of that bubble and just giving something a try that you otherwise wouldn't might make all the difference.
Yeah. No, very well said. I think that's something that a lot of people can take into account. That's something that I hope there are people listening into this show who can really resonate with that and can really expand upon where they're at and really step out of your comfort zone. Like I said, I think that was a big problem for me initially, even in college or just with moving to different places, was I was really cooped up. I didn't think about looking around on social media or looking around just to see, hey, are there these kinds of people that are more compatible with me and are more like they have the same struggles that I do. And funnily enough, that was actually one thing that I did in college was for a while I was with a Christian group. I found a lot of people that were really fun to talk to that had gone through a lot of the same struggles as me. I'm not sure if like in my head I'm the same level of like theologically enlightened, you could say. But the point being, there were still a lot of great people. And it's not just like a circle of theology you can find that. It's like you're getting at with what we've talked about over the show. Hey, you can go find like a Destiny raid, and there's a bunch of people who've gone through the same struggle. You can go through like a book club. You can go watch a movie. You can go watch sports with some people who've had different beginnings than you and can relate to you. Maybe you guys have a conversation over a drink or something. There are like circles of atheists who've come from like really bad Christian backgrounds, for crying out loud. There truly is something for almost everybody in this world. And I think that there is a lot of different like places where it can grow and develop, especially now with the technology that we do have. And I think, like you said, the hardest step is like the first one you take. But once you do, once you cross that threshold, it really opens the door for you to kind of say, like, yeah, this is who I am. And it's different. I think it's difficult, like you said, for a bunch of other people, depending on the context and depending on the situation, because there are always going to be people who oppose you. Maybe it's difficult to really embrace a hobby or something you enjoy because your family isn't supportive of it, even if it's not directly harming you, or even if you don't care so much as to what people's outside perspectives are. You just do it because. In fact, like that's something I've kind of touched on in the previous episodes of this show because I've had a lot of people on this show who, are speedrunners. Do they really care? No, because they're still people. I've had a lot of fun talking to them. They seem like they're really competent people. I know they're competent people. They've all lived their lives. They've all been through different experiences. A bunch of them are trying to get out and are trying not to just sit in front of a computer all day and are trying to talk to people and are in relationships and on and on and on. But they took a step and they tried something different. It changed their life for the better. And I'm glad they did. So I'm glad I talked to them. And I hope that anybody who's listening to this right now really does take what you say into account, is that just go out and find out what is best for you and what it is you feel like you want to do, what you need to do, because not only is it important that you discover that, but you're going to find a lot of people who also want to help you along that way and who are great for you, not just because they're supportive, but also because they can give you lessons and tell you some of the hard things that might not be easy to accept, but you need to hear. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Agreed.
Right on. Well, Declan, my friend, that is about our hour time slot. But I want to thank you again for coming onto the show. I feel like I definitely flubbed a couple lines and responses here, so I didn't mean to do you dirty on this episode. But I think you gave a lot of really intellectual responses. I think you might have sold yourself short earlier in the podcast when you were saying, "I don't know if I can do this, man." But thank you for coming on.
Of course, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun,
Yeah,
and yeah, and to all of our viewers, thank you for coming out today and giving us a listen.
yeah,
Means a lot to Zach.
that it does. I love you guys all so much. And I love Declan once again. Thank you, man, for coming on the show. If you guys want to listen to more of Mr. Siphon here, as he also goes by, his Twitch channel will be linked in the description or around the end cards of the podcast. Or if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can check the description down below. But until then, it might be a couple of weeks until the next episode of The Life Equation. Still got to figure out who is going to be the guest on that. I actually am considering having a local pastor who's a very intellectual guy. I want to have him on the show. He's been going through some personal things, so might be a while before that gets up and running. But otherwise, I will see you guys in no more than 2 weeks for the next edition of The Life Equation. And so, Declan, before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts?
Uh, Other than just go out there, make some friends, and maybe I don't know, try out a new hobby or two, something like
Yeah,
that.
advice to live by. So, yeah, everybody go out, everybody be safe, and everybody take care of yourselves. Meet some great people. Thank you all for listening into The Life Equation, and I will catch you all next time. Take care, everybody.